start with the disclaimer as usual. Let's move on. And why am I here? To share knowledge, to inspire people to be better at public speaking. So I used to be terrified of that, of public speaking, but I want to be a good keynote speaker, but mostly to highlight people that are important to me and valuable to the community, and like help them stand out, and like so more people could know them. And guys, here's Chris. Oh, here's Chris. I just wanted to show Chris for a second because he is an owner of Ridgeback InfoSec and instructor on anti-siphon training, but also my colleague at Black Hills. He's a penetration tester. But if you like click here on Ridgeback Information Security, you can go to profile of his company, and then if you click on his website here, you can go to his page on anti-siphon training. Uh, be knowledgeable about his trainings, what he's doing right now, and just to have in mind that his most recent training is called Offensive Training for Operators. So I want to ask about this, like the title of it next, but getting back to Chris, I'm going to make this full screen. And so, Chris, welcome to my stream. I wanted to ask you if you could introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dorota. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be on here. First time being on like a Twitch stream, so it's fun. I'm Chris Traynor. Like Dorota said, I'm a penetration tester for Black Hills Information Security. I also am an author and instructor of two classes that I develop through my company Ridgeback InfoSec, and I teach them with a kind of partnership with Anti-Siphon Training, which is a sister company to Black Hills Information Security. But I also teach the classes one off at conferences through the years. Through the year, I'm going to be up at KernelCon, kind of more of a partnership between Anti-Siphon and KernelCon, where a bunch of Anti-Siphon classes are going to take place next week on the 1st and the 2nd. So if you're going to be at KernelCon, if you happen to be there, you can catch me wandering around before I fly out on day one of the conference. But I have two classes that I teach. I have a offensive tooling foundations class, which is a 1 day course. There's really it's not necessarily introductory, but it's more of a we'll cover a lot of tools, kind of like a mile wide but a foot deep on all the tools to give everybody a good foundation of offensive tooling and what it's used for and how it's practical. And then I have a 2 day class, offensive tooling for operators. That one is a little bit more in depth. That we go into each tool and we get a little bit more technical, and we do attack things in both classes. I have virtual machines that you get, slide deck, recordings, the whole gambit of stuff, walkthroughs of labs and things like that. But it is really fun to get out in front and teach people. But where I really love spending a lot of my time is doing penetration testing with BHIS. I get to explore a lot of different companies and organizations and figure out what they're most afraid of happening, and then find out whether or not that can happen, um, which is a lot of fun. And I got to meet Dorota for the first time in Denver at our Wild West Hacking Fest Denver event. Just what was that? A couple months ago now, I think. Was it in February? I've lost track of the days this
Yeah.
year so far. But that was really cool. Get to meet a bunch of our people from all over the world, and hopefully I'll be able to come over to Europe at some point. I've got my name in for a few B-sides events around Europe. I haven't heard back from. I heard back from one in the UK. Unfortunately, didn't get it, but I've got a bunch out there as well. If you're going to be at B-sides Harrisburg or B-sides Kansas City at the end of April, I'll be there giving a talk called Pen Test Pains, and I'll also be at B-sides Fort Wayne um, in June. I think that is. So I got a whole list of things, but that's me. I talk, and that's kind
Oh,
of what I do.
that's
I
good.
talk
You're
and
on.
I write reports.
Yeah, I really like the Tyrion Lannister. Kudos. I really like that. Yeah, it's like what you yeah, it's what you are supposed to do on a podcast. You know, you talk, so it's like better if you're like a chatty person. I appreciate that actually. I have a lot of questions coming up, but before I forget about those two, I wanted to ask those first. Can you tell us about like where the operators in your course came out of, and like can you tell us more about the your company, Ridgeback, InfoSec, and about what is the meaning behind your logo of your company?
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, for your question about the operators part of my class name. So I love that you are the woman in red, like from the Matrix, and the reference there too, because one of the things that I wanted to kind of cross over with the naming of one of my classes was I love the idea of offensive operators, and I love the tie-in to the Matrix of where every time they're kind of plugged in and they're trying to get out of the matrix and they Neo calls back to the ship in a hurry to try to find an exit point. When the guy in the ship answers, he answers as operator because he's operating the whole engagement. He is orchestrating and watching and monitoring where everybody's going and what they're doing and helping them get in and out of places. And I like the idea of that, even if that's not a direct tie in to offensive operators, which also has a kind of a leaning tendency in a lot of people's minds to a more kind of militaristic idea. This is not a militaristic type of class by any stretch. It is there's definitely an overlap of concepts and techniques, I'm sure, but I won't teach you to hack other nation states. I just want to make that perfectly clear. Uh, that's probably a bad thing if you're doing that. But I do like the idea of offensive operator as a term because it encompasses a lot of offensive activities. In one of the classes we cover um, not only pen testing tactics where they're very loud, they're very noisy, they're very noticeable on a network, but also some tools and techniques that would be more leaning towards a red team type of engagement where you want to go a little bit slower. There are some options of executing the tools in a more uh, a more unnoticeable way, or that's your goal is to be unnoticed, and test really the detection and then the process and response of a blue team or a sock or something like that. Uh, it is really it's good to have that as a mindset as a wide concept, so you're not tied in. There's a lot of classes out there that'll teach you saying, this is our pen testing class, this is our red teaming class, this is our social engineering class, this is our phishing class. So covering those ideas, they're all offensive activities, kind of at their heart. So I don't like the delineation too much of a class that's named pen test this or that unless it is truly for that sole goal, um, which while the activities can overlap between a pen test or a red team, say, the overall goal of those engagements is different. So that's kind of how operator, offensive operator, how I like to think of it. I always like to think back at that scene or two in the first Matrix movie where they call out and the guy helps him and kind of directs him out of there. Not at all that the movie was any sort of inspiration of mine to get into tech and stuff. However young and impressionable I was when that movie came out. Um, but I developed. I think your second question was around Ridgeback
Mm-hmm.
InfoSec and how it kind of came to be. So Ridgeback InfoSec has been an organization, a company that I've been wanting to start for years. I just never really had a strict purpose to actually create it and then kind of cultivate it and try to build it into something. It really hit a tipping point, and I actually created the organization for the main purposes when you start teaching, especially offensive activities in the security world. One of the recommendations that I got from the good folks at Anti-Siphon was, hey, perhaps we shouldn't have Traynor as the company that is subcontracted here to teach this class. that teaches all these offensive activities. Because if someone takes it and is not ethical and doesn't have any moral conundrums about how using those techniques, if they get arrested and they get brought to trial, or they're trying to get out of some legal trouble, they can say, well, Chris Traynor taught me how to do this. And we all know that lawmakers, judges, lawyers, they're not particularly adept at understanding the differences and variations of our world and the purpose of things. And they might just say, like, oh, he taught him how to do it, so he did it, so he enabled him, and now we should name him as a co-conspirator of this felony. So one of the actions that is recommended when you get into that sort of thing of teaching, and trying to get actually paid for it a little bit, is create an LLC to literally limit your liability as best you can. Um, and I had the name for Ridgeback InfoSec. I've had that in my back of my mind rattling around for many years, because I have a Rhodesian Ridgeback dog, uh, which is a fantastic breed of dog, originally bred to hunt lions in South Africa and protect camps. So they're large breed dogs, but not as large as, say, a Mastiff or anything like that. Um, they're phenomenal. They're known in kind of the AKC, in the breed world, as the Navy SEAL of dogs. They're fast, they're strong, they're agile. They can run with a horse for miles on end, um, and they're just great dogs to have around. Great for family, good for protection, and all around. So the imagery from my company comes from the inspiration of a Rhodesian Ridgeback breed, which I love very much. Uh, I've had two in the past. I have one right now who's just turned a year about a week ago, and he's closing in on 100 pounds. Very, very great to have around the house, and and to have keeping me in shape, going on runs and walks and stuff like that. So, uh, if you don't know Rhodesian Ridgeback as a breed, I highly recommend the dog. I'll never get another type of dog as long as I can help it. Um, they are very, very loyal. They'll lay with you on the couch, or they'll go for a 3 mile run with you. They'll do whatever. They'll adapt to your personality. Fantastic, and they always have a very good temperament. Um, so Ridgeback InfoSec was born about, a little over 2 years ago, so to speak, and that's what I developed my classes through. It's also good as well if you live in the United States, I guess, depending on your state laws, that when you form an entity like that, you can form it as a pass through entity. So essentially, all income is still reported to my social security number still, but it's paid in all contracts and subcontracts for teachings. They're made out to the LLC. But that allows you to do fun things like go to these conferences and then say, this is a LLC expense, and I can now deduct that on my taxes.
Oh,
Uh, it's very helpful, right? If
that's
you've
nice.
got a company that you work for and you want to go to a few different conferences, you want to upkeep, as long as you file an LLC and say that it's service based instead of product based. So you're not like building a physical thing and selling it in a store, but you may be teaching, or you may be going around and giving lectures in smaller formats and things like that. uh, you can deduct a bunch of those things, as long as they are obviously pertaining to the purpose of your organization. So, let's say you have a company and you want to get more security certifications as an individual, and you want to do little talks at conferences, and your purpose for your LLC is to share knowledge and to teach, whether that's a 2 day class or a 1 hour talk. You can start. I'm not a tax professional, but you can start, make that travel cost a deduction off of your taxes and help you that way. I've redone my whole home network with much more beefy networking gear than probably 99% of people require. But I've been able to deduct that because it ensures that I can have a proper environment to teach from virtually, which is what I primarily do.
Oh, thank you for explaining. That's really cool. I think you introduced yourself to everyone pretty well, and we kind of have understanding who Chris is. But I always try to ask this question. So, can you tell us what makes Chris happy and like what sparks joy for you?
Well, what's yeah, what sparks joy for me?
Yes.
Oh, so I gotta say, the first thing that definitely sparks the most joy for me is being a father. My two little girls, and my family. They're the most important thing to me. Uh, that inclusive of my dog, of course. So my wife, my kids, my dog. Those are where I get the most joy. But kind of the second most thing that gives me joy is actually educating people. Whether to varying degrees, if I'm successful at teaching you, 80% new things in any of the things I talk about, or the webcasts I give, or classes I put out, that's fantastic. But if I teach you just something that's 10% um, of it you didn't know before, that's good to me. Uh, I personally, as I learn things and over my career, uh, it has been it's difficult for me to learn stuff quickly. I might pick up on what things are and their purpose and all that stuff quickly, but in certain things it is difficult for me to understand the full concepts until I've been doing it over and over and over again. And one of the things early in my career that was difficult was I landed in a couple companies that you couldn't ask questions. If you asked questions, it made it seem like you didn't know what you were doing, and that made it seem like you shouldn't have your job, and then you'll probably be let go. Like trying to educate yourself was sort of frowned upon. So I very much try to take the opposite stance on things, which is one thing I really love about BHIS and working there is there are no penalties for asking questions. If you don't know something, ask. Especially if it's most of the time, it's not that you've never known it; it's that you haven't done that thing in 4 or 6 months, or there's
Yeah.
new techniques that have come out and you don't know it all. Right? You can't possibly have everything in your back of your brain or in a notebook of every command and every possible tool to run in every scenario. So asking questions, especially in the cybersecurity field, is should be highly encouraged, and never ever should you look down on somebody trying to educate themselves. So if if in my teaching, what gives me the most amount of joy in that world, in the cybersecurity world, is if whether I'm at a class and I'm standing in front, or another tester at BHIS sends a question out in the general chat, if I'm able to help that person get it faster and easier than I was able to, then that is my primary source of joy and accomplishment. That's my goal. Is if I can make it easier for the next person, then I feel like I've accomplished something. So
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But like my next question is, I kind of have two questions. I wanted to combine them in one. So the first one is, what first got you into cybersecurity and what led you towards offensive security specialty? And the next one is, can you share a moment in your career that made you realize, yep, that what I was meant to do? Like this is it, like
that's such a good question, and I like these because everybody has a different answer and different perspective on things. So for me, getting into security was a bit of a delayed activity. I came out of college in 2007, and I wanted to do security right away. But at that time, iPhones hadn't even been released. Like they did not exist in the world. If you can imagine that time period in the world, right?
Mhm.
Is There was no such thing as a smartphone. People were hitting numbers multiple times on their keypad to do bare metal texting, or bare minimum texting. So the idea at most companies of having a security professional really wasn't in the private sector much. It was really an activity for the government. It was an activity for massive organizations only, and it was an activity for the military. Since I didn't want to work for a three-letter organization, and honestly, probably didn't have the IQ high enough to be recruited by one of those places, um, I took a detour into the software development world for about a decade until I finally had the opportunity to go to work for a company that was at the time had just announced a very public and very substantial breach of their organization in 2017, which was, of course, in the United States, people were probably very familiar with it, even though it was a number of years ago, was the data breach of Equifax. So I was actually already in talks with them for a position that was not security related, just software dev team, QA automation type of role I had been doing for years. And when I found out that it was Equifax from the headhunter that I was going for the position for, I kind of doubled down on wanting to go to them because and the recruiter left the door open to say if you want to pull out of the position because they just announced like 5 days ago their very public and huge and detrimental breach, then I totally understand if you want to back out. And I said, no, 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 push harder for me for this position because I knew that if I could get in with my expertise and experience in a non-security role in an organization that suddenly needs to pay full and complete attention to security, that there was no possible way they would be hiring on enough professionals to fill those roles quickly enough for the work that needed to be done. So I essentially came on in a non-security role, and within 2 or 3 months, I was able to parlay that position into, well, I'll be the application security person for these couple web apps, and then because of their need and they did not have the staff on hand and everything, I was able to kind of mildly strong arm them into saying, well, if I'm going to fill this role, I need you to send me to proper training. So I got a bunch of training out of it. And eventually, the security organization consolidated there. So I left the web dev side of things and moved into a security proper position, bounced around a few different types of roles in there, and eventually landed on the internal pen test team at Equifax for a while. And it was then that I discovered I wanted to do actual offensive activities. Being in the pen test team, having gotten a bunch of training around the offensive stuff, uh, I I knew from my past experiences where I did development work myself for a while, and then I changed to focus more on QA automation, testing, functional stuff, making things break from a user's perspective and scripting those things out. And when you're at that point in that type of position, it's a quick side hop over to being a web app pen tester. You're just changing in your mind that you're trying to break an application functionally, and instead you're breaking it for a security purpose. And in a lot of ways, it's the same type of steps. So once I started realizing that, I said, well, I want to do this. I want to do this right. So I built up that experience. Eventually, came over to Black Hills Information Security through after a number of years doing offensive stuff beforehand, and have been here ever since. So it's been a great kind of trip to not only be in an offensive security role and be a pen tester and get to do what I enjoy doing, and having the opportunity to teach others as well, but also to kind of finally realize after 9 or 10 years detour after college to actually be doing security things like I knew I wanted to from the beginning. So that was a very long answer to your two very simple questions, and I hope I answered both of them.
Yeah, you did, and thank you. Yeah, that's a very cool story. And actually, I'm really happy that I met you like at Black Hills because you are a very, inspiring person, I think. And yeah, my story was kind of long too. I will not tell you my story now, but it's like a very long story. But I really wanted to work in kind of like a programmer, hacker, kind of like a job. It didn't exist when I was a teenager, really.
Mhm.
It was kind of like something I wanted to do. But then I got like sidetracked and worked for a government and like accounting, like doing totally something different that I really wanted. Like I graduated with economics master's degree, so not what I wanted. But then after doing 6 years of that job, I realized, shit, I'm not living my own life, kind of. And then I started like thinking, oh, who I am, what do you like, what was your dream? Yeah, and then Mr. Robot came out, so that was like a
Mhm.
kind of a slap in the face, another reminder that this is what I wanted to do. I remember now, and I started learning that, and I didn't have like an easy life, so everything that I have now, I got through hard work, but yeah, I'm really kind of like long journey doesn't really make it like less valuable. It kind of makes me appreciate it more because I
Mhm.
work hard for everything that I have now. So if I would be given that everything as a teenager on a silver platter, maybe I wouldn't be as appreciative and grateful as I am now. And like
Mhm.
maybe I would be a different person, do different things. But like you have like a very cool story, so thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I wanted to, next question would be for people starting in cyber, what kind of advice do you have? What would you say to them? Like if you were like starting right now, what would like you say to yourself? What would be like top three advice? How to
Ooh,
succeed?
such a complicated question. Yeah. It's it can be very difficult. So I already mentioned some of my experience and background. I had, a decently technical background when I was trying to move into the security world. So which I think it is miles easier if you're trying to get into security and you're coming from a development background or even worked in a ancillary position to being on a web dev team, that you understand how web applications get built, deployed, maintained, and the difficulties there. I think moving laterally into a web application security type of role is so much easier than trying to become like a network security professional, um, because web applications are so very very complex. Each individual one is its own little unique snowflake because they can be configured and deployed in any number of a billion ways. Networks, when you bury down to it, all networks are built on the same core principles. Whether those principles are enacted correctly or not, you can easily learn what those principles are. But I feel like from a web application side, getting into that security type of mindset first, it certainly helps to come from that type of field or that background. If you were starting fresh, nothing to, didn't know anything, didn't know where to look or what to do, and stuff like that, there are a mountain of resources out there now that didn't exist a while ago. I'll give some shout outs to Jerry Auger and the Simply Cyber community. He puts out a lot of great content out there and puts stuff together. John Hammond as well. He's has a ton of educational stuff out there, and the things doing is great. Not to mention BHIS, Anti Siphon. I think now with Black Hills, I started listening to a lot of security podcasts when I tried to start, and now I think at Black Hills I think we have a thing like every single day of the week now. Like Mondays is a security talking about news session that's live and streamed. Tuesdays there's an Ask Me Anything, small kind of ad hoc get together thing every Tuesday, so you can ask a handful of security professionals any question that you want. Uh, Wednesdays has a webcast where we take an hour and teach any number of security related topics. BHIS has a webcast on Thursdays. And then I think on Friday now we have a Friday fireside chat thing, uh, that we're doing as well. That's more from the blue team side type of perspective. So there's a lot of great free resources out there for you uh, to learn before you ever step foot into a class environment or try to go for a certification. So I'd explore a lot of those podcasts, a lot of those webcasts, including this one here, where you can get to understand a few different perspectives of things from people and find out what you really like to do. I had a very lucky experience, and I did a talk on this a while ago at Pancakes Con a number of years back, which I think was like my first actual like conference talk. That if you take a risk and only do so if your life situation permits in your career, that targeting a post breach organization as I did can be hugely beneficial because you can have the opportunity to sit in a number of positions in a security organization before deciding which path you want to take. That can be very beneficial as long as you do your research on the organization. Make sure they're not going to tank and go under because of the breach. Make sure that they're going to have the revenue to survive that sort of thing and the processes and the goals to do it. I know of a lot of people, me included, who have been in non-security positions and have tried the arm twisting and the bending and the pleading and the begging of their organizations and their leaders to say, we don't really do security. Let me be that person. Let me do it. I want to do it. And that can be at a huge government contracting company or on a government in a government position, or it can be at a tiny startup. And a lot of times the answer is we just no, we don't care about security right now. We care about building the thing, doing the thing, getting it done. And that can beat you down over a number of years of constantly just being told, yeah, yeah, that's nice, but no, we're not doing that. Go sit in the corner and do the job you're hired for. So if you can find that measured risk to take in your career at a post breach organization, it can provide a lot of value, whether or not that's 5 years at that company like I did, or if it's 2 years or one. Depends on the position and the opportunity. Uh, but that can open a lot of doors and help you decide which path you want to take. If you want to go defensive, operations, offensive stuff, and then I'd say after you figured out that path, then look at spending the money at uh, on actual training for that career path. Since I know all too well that security training can be hugely expensive investment. Uh, it's of course an investment in yourself. So a lot of companies tend not to reimburse for those type of things, especially if your role is not yet a security role. But that investment is worth it to you if you know what you want to do and you seek training to do that sort of thing. So I would leave the purchasing of paid education to only to the point that you once you know the type of vein of security you want to spend your time in, because it can be a very costly mistake if you take 2 3 classes down a certain path and decide I don't really like this and then need to pivot and start doing something else. um, I know that anti-siphon very much tries to make it a non-cost prohibited type of entry into the field as much as we can. uh, and I'm honest. I'm not trying to like plug things over and over and stuff like that. But if you want to do offensive types of activities, and there's a few different issues that you'll probably face as I did. One, what does a pen test or a red team report look like? Like, because when you do offensive stuff, I know you think you're going to be hacking all the time,
Yeah.
but really you're writing reports half the time, if not more. You're setting stuff up, and you're working with customers and having conversations and getting the runway set out for engagements coming up, as well as working your current one, and you're writing the report for the current one and tweaking your past one to get that delivered all at the same time often. So if you don't really understand because you've never been able to see a pen test report, because let's be honest, those things are pretty confidential and sensitive at organizations, that can be a huge inhibitor to you. Uh, Another barrier for the offensive side of things is, well, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do in this position. I don't know what tools to use in this position. So that's another that is the reason, that second reason is why I actually teach, because coming in I didn't know what I didn't know. And I feel like if I just had a class that was 1 day or 2 day to just show me all the different tools and give me the baselines of them and go just a little deep for the understanding and actual practical execution of these things, I would then know, yeah, that's something I'm super interested in. And let me dive deeper in that. Uh, a third difficult thing that most people have, and I know I had, was when you get past the idea of reporting and you get past the idea of the tools and stuff you need to use. Um, Another difficulty is we all have NDAs. So you can't really walk up to a pen tester in most scenarios, or a red teamer, or somebody doing these offensive sensitive engagements and say, "Tell me about your test." And then they can say, "Oh yeah, I tested XYZ company and they had this and that and here's all the things wrong with them," because that would break a whole bunch of NDAs for that person. Uh, so one of the things I started doing a couple years ago is I have a webcast series with BHIS, and I gotta check. The next edition of it's going to be April 10th, where it's the illustrated pen tester, short stories of security. The third most difficult thing is people hearing properly redacted stories of different types of security roles to gain an understanding of what the day to day is for that type of person, or the cool things that can happen and the fun stories. So I've put together a series of webcasts to try to tell those. They're not all my stories. I aggregate them from people that I know and present them. So I think is a very, very long answer to your questions
It's
is
okay.
figuring out ways to get into things and find resources and stuff like that. And again, I know the cost barrier can be quite high sometimes. I will say, and I don't know if it's actually on the site yet, but it will be as soon as I can actually answer two emails about it. Is for my 1 day class, the offensive tooling foundations. We're planning a pay what you can workshop 6 hour version. So it's 6 out of 8 hours of it that you would normally get, that the class is going to be a pay what you can with anti siphon on May 30th. And that means exactly what you think it means. If you only have $25 to spend on training, put in $25, right? Um, if you have $250, put in $250 and take the class. And what it helps is it helps lower that barrier of entry for people. It helps most of that money. It helps going towards reducing the cost for future people. So if we can give away a seat eventually, then we can give away a seat eventually, for future classes and things. Um, but look for those opportunities to have gather knowledge for free, or at a reduction of cost, can be very, very helpful to you.
Thank you. That's a great answer. And my next one is because we like stories. We had like Brian Harris coming on here and telling us stories for 3 hours before. So at least tell us one story. Like, what is your favorite hacking related story? Either something funny, surprising, or just unforgettable. And don't disclose any client information. We don't want that. But like something that you could actually share.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a pile of them. I'll give you a preview of one of the ones that I'm going to be talking about on April 10th on that illustrated pen tester webcast series. Uh, I was on a pen test, and it was for a medical institution, and I wound up coming across in some scanning and some checking activities a possible infection of the conficker worm, which if you like look back in your Googling history of how old is Conficker, it's old as all hell. Um, you don't. I've never seen it in any other organization in active detection of things, and I came across this on a pen test. Of course, what that wound up meaning is I contacted the point of contact for this organization, and I said, hey, I found this. There's an indicator. I've double checked it. It looks like this device does have a Conficker worm infection on your internal network, and we need to ice. I need to stop what I'm doing. So essentially, at that very point of confirmation, all activity on my side stops, so that any forensic gathering of data and details isn't muddied with my activity. Uh, the point of contact was very receptive of it, and handled it extremely well. They got on it right away. They isolated the machine, uh, determined that it was acting incorrectly. But what it turned out to be was, as this being a medical institution, they have a lot of equipment that they do not directly control themselves as far as software versions. And as I said, the Conficker worm is old. It's been resolved by Microsoft for many years now. So you start out with, this is an unpatched system, because if it was patched, Conficker wouldn't even be able to get a foothold. It turned out that this system on the internal network happened to be a medical imaging device used during active surgery in operating rooms. So they isolated it. They determined that there was no control over the device, but it was very possible, very likely to be infected. But it is also many monies expensive machine. So it is not something that they can simply take offline. Otherwise, real life people needing real emergency procedures and surgeries would not get these things. So you got to always look at the risk and reward of companies. When I said earlier about what is important to the specific organization you're testing. And for this organization, the primary thing was make sure the patients get care, right? If there's an infection or something, isolate it, do all the things you're supposed to. But the base thing to resolve that issue, which would have been patch the system, was not possible. And this happens a lot with industrial control systems. It happens a lot with manufacturing plants, food processing places, and medical places. Is they get a piece of equipment patented, stamped, approved by the US government, and having all this with a very specific software version. And they can't simply roll out the updates as a normal laptop would get, because it would break that device. And the vendor needs to push those updates themselves. And a lot of times the vendors will just say it's not cost effective. We won't do it. If you would like, we'll sell you a new machine that'll be ready in a year or two for many more hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. And that is particularly a cost, prohibitive activity. So for that story, what they wound up doing is they made sure that the device was completely isolated off from the rest of the network, so the worm could not spread. Ensure that there's no communication going on with that device that's not them and what's expected. And then they allow that device to continue in proper isolation until it can be addressed with the vendor, who they got in contact with immediately. And I don't feel bad, because it provided good value to them. Because once they got their ducks in a row and things were set, I got the all clear, continue testing, just avoid that machine. And not a day later, I was looking through uh, some Nmap scan results of a few different systems. And I happened to notice this weird SNMP um, traffic going in and out of their network. And it turned out that another device was trying to make an outbound connection request uh, beyond their external perimeter to a system that was resolving to Zimbabwe, if I'm remembering correctly.
Wow.
This organization, of course, was not located in Zimbabwe. They did not have a presence in that nation. But they, nevertheless, this device was trying to call out. So I had to call the POC up like less than 24 hours later and say, I'm so sorry, but I'm pausing testing again. It looks like you have another indicator of compromise, of a potential outbound connection being made to a resource that's not you. We went through the same process again, paused and all that stuff. Uh, they were able to conclusively determine that their correct procedures and network configuration was terminating that request. It was triggering and trying to go out, but the outbound communication was being dropped and killed at the perimeter. So there was no successful connection made. But it was very much the same thing. That device happened to be the controller for that medical institution's backup power supply. So another device that was bought and sold as a controlling device of, say, backup generators and power conduits to control continued, let's say, uptime of that uh, medical institution, and it is also outside of that organization's direct control to patch. So again, they had to go back to the vendor and say, this needs to be addressed. But not only can we not patch this, we can't get direct access to the machine because it's locked in. Only the vendor can ever access it, or that's supposed to be how it is. But very clearly, something was on there trying to make an outbound connection request. So once again, they isolated that device, gave the all clear for testing. But I like to tell that story because it gives a little bit of insight into organizations that they work in a field that they need to have these devices,
Yeah.
right? They are not as easily replaceable as Susie in sales got her laptop compromised and we can just ship her a new laptop and replace it. It is a device that is imperative for the continued operation of the organization to provide any of its base business purpose. And in both of these cases, continues to save lives. So a very strong need. So I say this story because you have to understand your customers. You have to understand that they are in a difficult spot. It is not a position or a time for you to gloat in your awesome hackery of look what I found, look what I found. Or
Yeah.
I was able to compromise your systems in 30 different ways. You are doing these offensive activities only to make that company more aware of what their security issues are and to give good recommendations on to address those. I so hardly applaud this particular organization for how the point of contact handled the issue. The teams responded to the issue quickly, um, and that's something that you don't see all the time. Sometimes organizations they'll get these results and they'll just say, "Well, I guess that's just the way it is," or "We don't have the people to address this," which is again another very valid thing. Not a lot of these shops, a lot of these places, they're one or two person IT shops. They don't have the resources to do these activities and to fix everything. So that's one of many of the stories that I'll share on that April 10th webcast. And if you want, there are three that I've done before that share a bunch of other interesting stories from not just the internal network pen testing perspective, but of a few different. Some of my favorite ones out there are ones I get from our folks that do physical pen tests because those are always very funny to hear on all of the weird trying like the not most conspicuous people possible trying to get into a building and being inconspicuous at the same time and trying not to be caught and you get to hear some really cool stories.
But yeah, thank you for sharing. That was like a very, yeah, also like a different perspective because mostly people share, oh, I did this cool thing and there was like
Mhm.
this, but you like put it like a different perspective on how the client handled it, and that's like, if it's a hospital, then we are talking about human lives there as well. So that's like another layer. So yeah, thank you. That was like a very nice pick, and I have a question that I'm a bit afraid to ask, but yeah, tell me if you can answer it. If not, then I will move on. So, what does a typical day look like for you as a pen tester red teamer? Is that something that you could tell us,
A
like in few sentences?
a typical day of doing pen testing stuff. Is
Yeah,
that what
yeah,
you're?
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's yeah, I can absolutely answer that without obviously mentioning any particular details.
yeah,
So
sure.
I I referenced it a little while ago about the amount of time you actually get to spend doing uh, doing hacking activities like hands-on keyboard trying to break into systems and organizations is much less than you might think. So everybody hears pen testing, every hear red teaming, social engineering, phishing, and they're like, "Ooh, that's interesting. That's sexy positions. I want to do that thing because I'm hacking away and I'm doing awesome stuff." The only as I mentioned with that last story, the organization responded well, and not to kind of to my own horn here, I feel like they were able to respond well because I was able to give that information well. I was able to give the draft write up of that scenario and the situation, the details I had collected, and hand that over to them into, and I can't stress this enough, an actionable format. Because if I was to just say, you got configure, here's the system, and then told them nothing else and gave them no direction, that would have really hurt them. If you can, the majority of the time that I spend in a pen testing role is making sure my reports are good, making sure my reports in the end can be delivered to an executive to understand the high level risks and strategic changes they should consider for their organizations. Secondly, to the findings directed to a team that can actually fix the broken things or the risk things, with recommendations tied to those, and a let's call it an abbreviated write up of the issue, and then further down the line in a for a third group taking the report as a deliverable, uh, a detailed methodology of the step by steps that it took me to get to that place, the exact tool commands that were issued, the exact uh, analysis that was done, the exact areas that pointed me into this direction and carried me down the rabbit hole to find the particular issue. That has a deliverable group not only to the organization, who somebody who is in a position that it does not do this activity could then read it as a literal story of methodology on how to get there, as well as if I ever have to come back to the report, I don't have to remember every single thing that I did. I can reread the report. Or if Dorota gets my report or tests that company the next time around, she can go back and read everything I did and understand each command and each step that was taken to find new ways to attack. Um, I'm stressing that report thing because I see a lot of people, and I'm not this or devaluing the effort of saying, I'm hack the box, I'm 1% on hack the box, or I've done all of this, I've been able to compromise this machine, or I can do this attack and that attack. To me, as a person who's looking for another pen tester to join me at an organization, either to work on engagements themselves or to work on an engagement next to me, I'm super impressed at your technical ability. But at the end of the day, I need to know that you can organize your thoughts and your accomplishments into a consumable and actionable format for a customer to to take that and then run with it. So I'd say on a typical day for me during an engagement, there's probably about 10 to 15% of my day that is lining up the actions that are need to be completed for my next test that's coming up, and handling the questions and follow up and debrief from my previous test that was preceding the current engagement. And then you've got at least 40 or 50% of my time making sure that my what I'm doing on the current test is documented properly. Not 100% polished, but documented step by step, reporting as I go. And then whatever that 30 40% of the day that's remaining is actually trying to get further in the environment and further on the engagement. I suppose I left out, there's probably 10% of my day in there where it's just internal communications, internal team meetings and things like that that everybody has at their company. So there's a draw on time there. But if you're thinking about doing a pen test or a red team position and thinking, all I'm going to be doing is wearing my black hoodie, turning the lights down, putting on the Halo original soundtrack, which, yes, I was listening to that earlier today as I finished writing a report, just in great background sound. Um, and you're just focused on hacking away, you're going to, I don't know what job you're going to get that's going to let you do that. I don't. So, if you were to come to me looking for a pen test position, your strongest thing that you can show me is a write up of what you did. If I can read your even rough report of hacking something, if you are 1% on Hack the Box, take one of those scenarios, write it for me. Put it in a methodology. I don't even need to see the finding necessarily. Just write a methodology step by step as if you were going to write a blog post or deliver a report to a customer so that somebody could re execute those steps again. If that can be written clearly, good references, from a good perspective, and in a helpful way, then you're miles ahead of your competition in getting a position.
Yeah, that's actually a very good idea. I remember I wrote my first report like in second year of like preparing to enter cyber, and was like totally, if I would look at it now, it was totally, like more like a
Mhm.
write up than actual report. But it was something that got me a lot of, like comments and likes, like of people like looking at me. Oh, she's learning reporting because she knows that's super important. Although it was not, it didn't look super professional. It had like Wonder Woman on the cover and stuff like that. But it was kind of like me saying, "Oh, I understand that pen testing is, like you hack things. You wear like a black hoodie if you want, but most of it is reporting. So, like, thank you for highlighting that again."
Yeah, and one of
Uh,
the things that I'm actually going to try to do, I for both my classes, because I mentioned one of the barriers I feel like people getting into the offensive world of things is lack of access to good reports that you should be expected to write when you get that position. So if you don't know your day to day, you don't know the types of things you might run into, those little short stories, you don't know the tool set that you need to, and if you don't know how a good report looks, you're going to have a real hard time figuring out if it's a job you want to do. So one of the things I'm working on to release later, maybe in the next couple of months after my brain recovers from all all these cons, is as part of my classes, I'm going to write up the labs in the format of as if you are methodology for a pen test report. So when you read through the lab walkthrough, it's going to be exactly how I would write that execution and that finding and discovery process as if you were writing it for a customer. So giving that bit of insight and glimpse into what that type of job might be. Because I realize that a lot of the people that I get as students, they're in this same position of saying, this isn't something I do currently. And there's a good mix of students that are saying, I will never do this position, but I want to understand what my counterparts do. I'm on the defensive side, or I'm a manager, and I want to know what they're doing and the tools they use and why they use them. Uh, but they never have a understanding of what is a good artifact to get out of it. What is a good report? What's the measure? And I can't count how many times I get on the phone with a customer after an engagement to do a debrief, and I'm thankful for this. They say, we've used past organizations, we've used past pen testing firms for many, many years, and looking at your reports and how this is written and how this is organized and then being actionable is a clear differentiator between what we have been getting, where a lot of the pen test companies are, yeah, we're just going to run a Nessus scan on your network and then we're going to print the output, but we're going to change the color scheme and the logo on front of it to our logo and give
Yeah.
that to you for your $50,000 1 week engagement of your network with zero verification or execution of any of its findings. Or on a web app side, and I've been on the receiving end of this. Uh, as an internal pen tester, we hire a third party organization to do an merger and acquisition test of a web app, and they perform a burp scan, print the HTML report of burp, and again change the color scheme and the styling, and then slap their logo on the front of it and hand it over to me as an internal pen tester and say, "Here's your report." And I'm like, "This is 100% not actionable and 70% false positive. That doesn't help
Yeah.
us. It just doesn't." So yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. I actually saw that happening, and like, yeah, I will not maybe speak to that, but that's actually out there, and yeah, and people are getting paid for that. So it's kind of like for me, it's embarrassing because I value quality, but
Mhm.
yeah,
You've gotta, and that's a lot of times it is companies that they're actually trying to get value out of it, and they unfortunately have that bad experience of getting something that doesn't give them value. But there is a very real need out there for a lot of organizations that are heavily saddled with compliance, that they need a technically a pen test to check box off of an audit. And for those people, doing hiring some firm to do just a scan with no verification and handing that over is all that they need. And they accept that. Whether or not they realize the amount of risk they're really accepting or the value they're not getting is kind of inconsequential to them. What they are really doing is they're just trying to make it so the company can continue to operate and pass an audit. That is their motivation. And that's valid for a lot of places and a lot of people.
yeah, I think we have a guest here. uh, okay, my cat just came on my desk. I think it's
Yeah.
visible, but like my next question is because you mentioned like your courses about tools, you mentioned like tools and like techniques. So,
Mhm.
what is your favorite tool and why?
Oh, my favorite tool out there. Oh gosh, that is so difficult to answer. I think across my two classes we cover something like 35 or 42. I don't know. I just revamped the 2 day class and taught the new version of it for the first time last week. But I think we're north of 40 tools, so it's real hard to nail down one of them. Um, One of the things that I see constantly, it's a tool, but it's not a tool that actually hacks things. Um, the best things that you can have as a red team or as a pen tester is realizing the types of things that are more auxiliary and assist in your activities more than actually exploiting things. So
Mhm.
let's say, for instance, you're doing network pen testing and you are conducting um, you conduct a Nessus scan, which you absolutely should. Nessus is a great tool. It's costly, but it is a great tool. It finds a lot of things, and it helps minimize the amount of time a tester would need to spend manually discovering everything in front of them.
Mhm.
So there's a I won't be that person that says red teaming and pen testing should be 100% manual activity. If you want to pay me 3 months of time to do it, I'll do it 100% manual, but it can't be done in a 1 week time period or a 2 week time period. Uh, but let's say you run all of these tools. You run Nmap, you run Nessus, you're running a bunch of other discovery things. But now you have so much data that you don't know how to aggregate it. And you don't know, it's going to take you forever to take the list of affected systems and perform a verification of that finding on them. So one of the greatest tools you can have, and I talk about one to call it out is one that Justin Angel, goes by the handle of Imposter Keanu, has put together, and it's called Par Suite. And it is in the auxiliary section of one of my classes to talk about uh, this. It is essentially a collection of scripts that it's mapped to a bunch of other tools to take the output of other tools and then make sense of them so that you as a offensive operator can take action on those findings in a quicker way. So you can take it as easily as saying, uh, let's go for a very easy one here. SSH misconfiguration on an internal environment affecting 262 systems out of a 1,000 system environment. That's not a way out of left field type of number. I've seen it be much higher than that. You certainly can't verify all of those. Uh, but you can have tools like Nmap and NSE scripts that can help you do spot checks and run their scripts to make sure that Nessus can confirm the Nessus finding, and then you can get that listed. So Parsuite can take the .nessus file out as the output of the Nessus scan, parse through all of that, collect every single one of the findings in their own directories and folders right there on your system, build this tiered directory structure, have a listing out of all the affected systems' IP addresses, and have a second listing of all the IP addresses and the affected ports, and give you a singular file that you can then use to pass into Nmap and say run verification on all these hundreds of systems.
Oh,
So
that's
that
pretty cool.
step right there that helps you just aggregate a tool to make it more actionable can save you loads and loads of time. I'm focusing on this as my favorite kind of tool because one of the hardest things you do, and if you get on an interview and I'm interviewing you for an offensive activity or an offensive role, I'll ask you, what's the hardest thing? And I've been asked this question interviewing. What's the hardest thing about being a pen tester or being a red teamer or being on an offensive engagement? And you can have your opinion on it, but doing that as a job, you are focused on a particular engagement for in my current role, typically 5 to 10 days. The dwell time for a real attacker is months in an environment. We have 5, maybe 10 days in a network. Uh,
Mhm.
your hardest thing to do is time management. Your biggest hurdle is going to be, where do I spend my time and how much time should I spend on that thing? So anything you can do, any collection of scripts that you can pre-build out to speed up your processes that are done over and over and over on engagements, like running a Nessus scan and then parsing those results and having a handful of scripts out there that could then go through that. And I've actually built a large bash script that I literally called mundane.sh for all these mundane, menial, tedious tasks of verification, where it'll go through all of the Parsuite directories. And I've identified certain verification steps for different command line tools. And I can button click down and say, I want to verify number 3. And then I hit enter. And then it says, okay, I'm going to run this nmap command with those systems targeted. And I say, okay. And then it runs the nmap command and shoots the output out for me. Speed up those menial, mundane, tedious tasks so that you can focus on the fun stuff. That's your best thing. So that's why I like that type of tool best.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And yeah, next question is like maybe I know you can probably say like a lot to that question, but can you maybe like just say like 3 things that you like, pop up in your mind like straight away? What skills do you think are must-haves for an aspiring red teamer?
So the best skills that you can have, the top 2 or 3 that you can have getting into the offensive side of things, and really any security position, but particularly the offensive side of things, is one. be curious, right? Uh, you can ask the questions. If people ask you the questions, answer back. Realize that you're, as long as somebody has put the bare amount of the minimum of trying to Google something themselves, they're trying. Help that person along, but also be curious to ask questions yourself.
Mhm.
Two is to realize that, and I do mention this a number of times in both of my classes, is there is no one tool to rule them all, right? You can't just do one tool on an engagement and feel like you're accomplishing something. And you can find, for every one tool that's out there, you can find 3, 5, 15 others that do 70% the same thing and maybe 30% something a little bit better as a component. So realize that, um, if you get onto a test and one tool simply won't execute, you need to be able to reach back in your in your figurative tool belt and pull something else out that will do the job. A good example of that is, let's say that you're on an internal pen test and you want to collect the bloodhound data. You've gotten a domain account and you want to collect bloodhound data.
Mhm.
The typical direct way to do that is to run sharphound. That's the prescribed way of doing it.
Yeah.
Sharphound only runs on Windows machines, doesn't run on Linux. If you've landed on a Linux machine and you need to collect data for bloodhound to find your new escalation paths, you need to be aware of other tools out there that can do that data collection. A good example is the bloodhound.py repository that's out there. That is a basically a Python port over of Sharphound to a certain degree and will collect all that information. So if I land again, you land in a scenario where you can't use your usual tool, you need something to fall back on. And I'd say if there's a third thing that is a good skill for an offensive operator to use, um, it's almost a reiteration of the first thing of being curious and asking questions, but honestly realize that you need to continue to learn throughout your career. This is not a career where you get to get in your position and then sit back and not do anything and just say, I've gone through the works and this is always going to be the same. And these steps are always going to be the same. And that's like, and I'm not knocking on this because I've worked in a sandwich shop before. I've worked in a firehouse subs in college. At a certain point, you've memorized the menu. You know every ingredient to every sandwich that can be ordered, and that's it. You do this, deliver sandwich. This, deliver sandwich. Clean up at the end of the day, your day's done. This isn't the type of position that's at all like that. You will constantly have to learn and constantly improve and change every couple years in order to be successful and progress in these type of roles. That's what I would say is the top three types of things that you should be doing. I guess skill wise, I already talked about reporting as something completely separate.
Yeah.
Um, that would those three core skills are is what's going to make you capable of doing good reports and delivering good artifacts.
Yeah, that's like a very good thing. But guys, yeah, I think like some people out there are just a bit like, oh, I just passed my OCV, I'm a god now, like
Yeah, they just sit back and kind of rest
sit back,
on that.
I'm
I
amazing.
have this certification, which certifications have their place. Some of them have very practical application and they require practical execution to obtain them. I love those types of certifications. But there are other ones out there that people will say, I have this cert. I shouldn't have to prove to you anything beyond this. And there
Yeah,
are a lot of ones out there that you can say, oh, uh, I got this certification, but if I ask you to do explain to me a simple execution of like how would you actually do that thing, the cert didn't teach you that.
yeah.
You didn't actually get to do that. Um,
And it's like really
and
important to see that if you just sit back and like stop learning, that you start forgetting things and you get rusty. And so yeah, you have to keep on like refreshing your knowledge.
yeah, and I'll let you in on a little secret there. one of the main things I get out of teaching, uh, and this is, yes, I make a little bit of money off of it. But one of the main things that I get out of teaching is I design my courses around what I call experiential knowledge. So I'll, like I said, there's many tools that do the things. These are the tools that I use, because the ones I'm talking about are the ones I most often get results from, out of my experience that I'm sharing with you. But one of the best things and the little things I get out of teaching as well is when you sit down and you say, I've got 20, I've got three, I've got 50 students all locked in, listening to try to understand how this works and how to use it. You have to become a pretty knowledgeable about that thing, like beyond what it would take to actually execute it, because you need to be able to be aware of the common pitfalls, the barriers that people are going to run into. So one of the things I get out of actually teaching is becoming better at executing my tools. So if you really want to get good at something, try to lay out the format as if you're going to deliver that content to somebody else to teach them how to do it better. And in and of doing that activity, you will become better at that thing.
Yeah, that actually like kind of like a mind game I'm doing with myself sometimes when I'm trying to understand something.
Mhm.
Then write a post on LinkedIn or like yeah, I have a GitHub now that I'm going to change into a blog with notes, but mostly it's LinkedIn. So I'm trying to explain the thing I'm trying to understand myself in a post. So
Mhm.
if I know how to explain it, that's when I know that I understood that thing, you know. So kind of if I or if I explain it to my grandmother and she gets it, that's I feel like a successful person there. So I have four questions, and I
Yeah.
think we are a bit like slowly running out of time. But okay, if you weren't working in cybersecurity, what would you think you'd be doing instead? What is like the first thing that pops into your mind in here?
Uh, I actually thought about this just the other day. Is like if I had all the money and I didn't have to work anymore, I would do three things. I would play piano, breed and raise Ridgebacks, and then I would also just spend all the extra time that I had just out outside and with my family. That's it. Those are the three things that if I had all the money in the world, if I didn't have to work, if I didn't do anything, like would you still do security stuff? Maybe. Like, but if I didn't have to for like work, I would do it as a hobby. But three things that I would really love to be doing, that like in retirement, this is what I want to do. Just spend time with my family, go places and do fun things with them, sit around and better at playing piano, and raise Rhodesian Ridgebacks. That's it.
That's a beautiful dream. Actually, I that's really resonated with me because if I wouldn't, I would probably do some cyber because I want to learn, so keep my brain working. But I have like my guitars there. I don't know if you can see those, but so
Mhm.
my kind of like a kind of small dream is to start producing like making music. So I would probably start being better at playing guitar, maybe yeah, start recording that. And then I always wanted to. I have a Maine Coon cat, so I wanted to be like a breeder of Maine Coons, so have like 20 of them. That would be like amazing for me. And the third thing, that's why it resonated with me. I would like to travel the world and hike and take, because I'm also like a photographer. So I wanted to buy like a drone and make beautiful, imaginary, beautiful pictures, beautiful videos to show people like the world because a lot of people are just like stuck in the cubicle most of their
Mhm.
lives. So yeah, maybe that what I would do. Okay, and three questions. Burnout prevention. Best ways, in your opinions, to like work to not be burnt out or like to prevent it.
Yeah. So, yeah, burnout prevention is something that is a serious concern, especially with mine. With with the amount of just additional learning for this type of field that you have to stay on top of, which I mentioned, the amount of regular day job activities that you have to do, and certainly the amount of additional late evening time it takes to develop courses, keep them up to date. I'm keenly aware of burnout. So one of a couple of things that I do for that is I like to exercise. I like to be outside. I like to go on walks with my dog. I like to go for runs and things like that. So physical activity for me is a big release from burnout, and trying to stagger the time to be able to work those into my weeks. Another thing that I've tried to do, and I have mentioned this before, is I want, if I was just sitting around, I had all money, is just I would just play piano and get better at it. It's one of the things that I picked up was one of these little. I keep it right in front of. I have my actual keyboard, and then I have this right behind it. Is a little roomy keyboard that hooks up to my tablet here. Um, and I've done bad at this over the last couple weeks, but every morning before I get started, I try to do 15 minutes of just a little bit of playing the piano, just to try to, I don't think it's a great, I don't drink coffee. I don't read that many books, but I think you should start your day not just jumping straight into the neck deep stress of your job. Try to do something else before kicking things off. Those are good burnout avoidance things. Physical activity and something that exercises your brain that is not your job.
Yeah, great answer. I do cycling, so that really clears my mind, and I
Hmm.
think yeah, it helps me to be a better person because then I come relaxed into like the work environment
Hmm.
with like a positive mindset. So yeah, for me that's cycling definitely. Okay, and two last questions. I always ask those at the end. Favorite hacker movie and favorite food.
Favorite hacker movie? That's real difficult. So many good ones there.
You can say top three. Then.
Well, so I mean, we've been talking about the Matrix a number of times, and certainly there's a hacker component to that sort of thing. Um, but I do really enjoy Hackers, the movie. Is a really fun movie to watch. Um, I
Yeah.
suppose paired up there with that is probably Sneakers. As far as like a full-on cinematic movies, those ones, Mr. Robot for TV show. I know that when I got heavily into watching Mr. Robot, my wife liked the show. What she did not like is me pausing it whenever there was a terminal on the screen and then running up close to the screen, reading what was on the terminal, and then explaining it to her, who's not in this field at all, because she made a mistake like 2 episodes in of saying, I don't understand what he just did on there. And I'm like, oh, that was a big mistake. I'm going to explain to everyone. It quickly made the show unenjoyable for her, I'm sure. Um, and what was it? What was the other question?
Favorite food.
Ooh, favorite food: steak. Easily a good ribeye steak, cooked medium. Yeah, it's an easy answer for me. That
So,
will make me happy.
so I guess you enjoyed the steak dinner at the Wild West Hacking Fest.
Oh, so I I make sure that everybody has gotten their chances to go up and get their food. But if they're still serving steak after I've had my first, I will get a second. And if the line has totally died down and I'm sure everybody has gotten a chance, I will go back and get a third steak.
Yeah,
It's delicious.
yeah, they are so
So
good.
yeah, for people unfamiliar, at Wild West Hacking Fest in Deadwood in October, one of the things that we do is they pull up to the conference center, to the back big doors, the loading dock doors, a big chuck wagon where they cook steak right there. They cook beans, potatoes, a whole bunch of awesome stuff, and then everybody gets to line up, and you have a big, nice, amazing steak dinner, which is really really good.
Yeah, actually, I experienced that first on the Denver conference. And
Hmm.
for me, it was amazing because first I'm a foodie, and second, I don't really have a lot of experience with American food. Eat something else in Poland. It's amazing. So you probably don't have this in there, but it was a new experience to me and like mind blowing because I never tried mac and cheese, for example, or like the
Oh.
potatoes were a bit different, and the steak was like was mind blowing. So I had that was maybe my favorite part of the conference. Uh, I don't know. Obviously, my talk was amazing too, but the steak was like I will never forget it. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, at the end, if you want to, thank you for coming to my stream. We already spent a lot of time together, so I really appreciate you dedicating your time to come here and share your knowledge, share your experiences with people. But if you want to share something at the end, a summary or final words, now is your time. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate you having me on here, Dorota. It's really good to get out and talk, and I'm trying to do more of these things as much as I can, where it's not a Black Hills webcast or a conference event necessarily that like we put on. So like I said, I'm trying to get out to more B-sides events around the world and go on to podcasts and webcasts that are not ours. Try to talk to people, get in front of people, share experiences of things, and help them get into the industry, get started, uh, or if they're in already, help them get a little bit better. So if that's something that you guys interested in, if you want to find out where I am, what I'm doing, and stuff like that, the best place. I'm slowly trying to migrate all of my where am I going to be, what am I doing types of stuff to all come from my Ridgeback InfoSec accounts on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and such. Uh, so that if you ever want to see, hey, is Chris teaching again? When can I take his class again? You can certainly just go to ridgebackinfosec.com. That'll redirect you to the anti-siphon page. That's where I'm doing most of my classes through, but there will be instances like here in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm going to be teaching in early November for a local conference here for a 1 day class. So if you're interested in like what's going on for the classes or webcasts or little 20-minute conference talks and stuff, um, go to find Ridgeback InfoSec on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you can follow those, and I'll always
Yeah.
be posting updates. I'm going to work on, as soon as I finish another revamp of my 1 day class here, I'm actually going to put together a proper website instead of just having Ridgeback InfoSec redirect to anti-siphon. But it's just a question of managing time. That's all.
Yeah,
So thanks again, Dorota, for having me on, though, and I hope people enjoyed and got something out of the stories.
yeah. I actually like I learned myself a lot, and I got inspired. And yeah, I think I will check out your course myself because you really sell it well. And yeah, I did learn a lot, like listening to you and how to be better in reporting, like how to be a better pen tester. So thank
Mhm.
you for coming on my stream and sharing that. And now I'm going to wave bye. Thank you. Bye.